Is the group here that we're talking to yet? Because I only see 2 people.
Yes. And what? Those are the 2 we're targeting.
Okay.
And then these are the 2 that are coming back from the restroom.
Oh, must go to restroom.
Yes. And then here's some more.
Oh.
So we're all here, but we're kind of sitting in a circle so that we won't be able to see all of us all of the time.
Okay.
But we did take a moment or 2 to introduce you, and I hope I did a proper introduction. You might want to introduce yourself again, and I explained how you were the author of different books, and I explained just briefly how you went about using the diaries, the journals of Lewis and Clark to write your book.
Exactly. That's the book that we did together, was
yes.
How We Crossed the West.
Yes. And then we took a look
at
yes. And then we took a look at your Witches book trailer as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. My scary book trailer, where I got to try to sound a little bit scary. Okay, and do you guys all have copies of the books in front of you or not?
We do.
You do? Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, you can call me Roz. Okay. It says Rosalind. My website says Rosalind. My books say Rosalind, but call me Roz. And my last name is Schanzer, which rhymes with dancer and answer, so it's Roz Schanzer. And we had a really good time with Amy's class. And I don't know if she told you what we did and what the students did. So do you know about our little project that we worked on together?
I did not share with them what the kids did after our conference, no.
Okay, I'm going to share that as part of this talk. Okay. So I thought, are you hearing me clearly? Because I'm hearing a little feedback.
Yeah, let me just, is that better?
Say something.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, that's a lot better.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and so the first book, the book that I did with Amy's class, was How We Crossed the West, this guy right here. And it was a really good book for her age level, and it was the first nonfiction book, serious nonfiction book that I had done, and I had so much fun doing it that I got kind of hooked on nonfiction. And what we did in her class was to go through the book, and then we did a special project together where the kids wrote stories, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. There are so many Common Core related things that you can do with How We Crossed the West. So if you do have it in front of you, I'll explain the words that are in those boxes are from the real journals of Lewis and Clark. And that was not my only source of information, but it is the source of all the copy in the book, because that way the explorers could tell about their adventures themselves. And you'll see how this ties in with what we did with her classes and what maybe you'd be interested in doing with yours. What's the grade level that you guys teach? Do you have various grade levels, or is it mostly all the same?
We're all elementary, so we span from grades 1 through 6.
1 through 6. Yes. All right. Well, I'll think 1 through 6.
Okay.
Okay, when you first open up the book, you'll see a map. And it's a map of Lewis and Clark's journey, so I'll just kind of hold that up so you can see it. Yeah.
And Sue's showing us too.
And maps, by the way, maps are a really fun thing to do in class, and especially if you have these cool books, because in your textbooks they might not be so interesting, but kids love to make their own maps, and they can illuminate them, which means draw the pictures themselves. It helps them remember everything that's there. So you're learning geography, and with this book you're also learning history and even culture, because the Indians that are on those pictures are the real Indians that were in those real places, wearing exactly what they would have worn at that time. And kids, I'm telling you, they love doing this and decorating the maps and putting on, you know, little winds blowing in from the corners, and putting in, I put the states in this one so that you can see where Lewis and Clark really crossed. You can add extras, even though there weren't states then, and that's explained on the map. But you can put on those beautiful compasses in the upper right-hand corner. You can see there's a fancy compass, and that's a fun thing to do. In the journals that they wrote, the different people on the trip wrote journals every single day. And so a lot of classes that I talk to try a journal thing. And that's really related to Common Core because it includes writing and it includes nonfiction, because if you're writing a journal about something that really happens in your life, that's nonfiction. And what I like kids to do is have fun doing that. It doesn't have to be all serious, and they can draw pictures all over it. And if they go on a field trip, they can put things that they've found, brochures, or plants, or if you go to a museum, you can put certain things in from the museum, or if you go on a field trip where there's an outdoor setup, you can stick in leaves and flowers and all kinds of things. So it should be fun, and people then can put them together. What we did in Amy's class was super cool, and I'm going to tell you what it was. I wanted them to be able to write nonfiction. And one thing that really is nonfiction is things that are happening now to people that you know, or things that happened to them in the past. So I'm going to put on my glasses and tell you what we did. Okay. One thing that we did was I taught them how to be like news reporters and interview members of their families. And kids love adventure stories. And I had them interview their family members about adventures that they had had in their past. So the kids, and we talked about good interviewing techniques and how you have to be nosy and ask hard questions, not the easy ones. And think of cool questions or things that you always wondered about that the people in your family knew. And we talked about that quite a bit. And so they talked to their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles. And I'm just going to read you some of what these kids wrote because I think it's so cool. So, Amy, if that's okay with you, I did little takeouts.
Yes, that's
some of the things they wrote.
Yes.
So it was adventures, right? Dad was such a daredevil that he went car surfing with his friends. His friend tried to throw him off, but my dad was good at staying on. He only fell off a couple of times. My dad thinks cliff jumping is the most fun stunt because he loves the rush of falling through the air. And then he put in a bunch more stunts that his dad did, and everybody kind of illustrated it, and he put a picture of Christopher Reeve as Superman because his dad was kind of like Superman, and a bunch of other pictures. So that was a fun thing. And then here's another one. My brave, amazing uncle was in the Army. He and his team had to go through this confidence course. There was a building that was 40 feet tall, and they had to rappel down the building. The 40-foot-tall building would sway. My uncle said it was the most scariest time for him in the Army. Now my uncle is looking forward to becoming a fire chief. He is a wonderful uncle because he risks his life for others every day and helps somebody that needs help. So that one's sort of a semi-serious one. And then here's some cool, gross stuff that somebody wrote. I really like this one. Then we'll stop. During the first year of medical school, my mom had to dissect a human body. It was a smelly task, and after they were done for the day, they would be smelly too. Something that she thought was pretty funny was the comments that people would say and the funny faces they would make when they would smell the anatomy students. So I love that these kids were really creative, and I've got like tons more of what they wrote. But you get the gist, you know. The kids aren't just writing, my grandmother was born in 1947 and lived in Akron, Ohio. You know, it's not like that. It's where you want to say something that's so interesting that the kids are writing a page turner where you wonder what happens next. And those are just little outtakes. They wrote a whole piece about it, and they did such a great job that Amy can explain this to you later, I guess, but they had a big party, and the people that they interviewed, their parents and grandparents and so forth, came, and the kids read what they wrote. People were laughing and crying and playing music and eating food, and it was a very big deal that they were each an author like a news reporter. So that is a great way to do Common Core material. And by the way, while we're talking, if anybody has any questions, please chime in, because that's perfectly fine with me. I don't want to just sit here and lecture at you the whole time. So if you have anything you want to say. The Lewis and Clark book and all the other books, being nonfiction, have to be 100% accurate. You cannot put one word in somebody's mouth. So when I use quotes, it's the real quotes from real words people really did say. And if I show what kind of clothes people wore or what animals they saw, it has to be what the people really did wear, including all the Indians, and what they saw, and like all the boats in that book are accurate. And so where do you get the research for that? And kids like to do the research. It's kind of like being a spy or a detective who's uncovering things. So where did I get, say, the research for the artwork? Well, in the journals, there are drawings in the journals. So there's one drawing that I really thought was interesting. The Indians out on the west coast, the class of Indians, they had flat heads. And so what they would do is, I don't know if you've read the book or not, but it was a fashion statement. And so when the babies were little and their skulls were soft, they put them on a board, they tie them on real tight, and they put their head up, say here where my elbow is, and put a lid on the board that's attached like a hinge. And it had like a leather shoestring kind of thing that went from the base of the board here up to the top. So the baby's head's here, and every day they tie that string tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until the baby's head was no more than 2 inches from here to here, and then it went to a point higher up. And kids are always worried about that if it made them stupid. It didn't, because at that age, their skull is pliable and it's not a hard bone, so it didn't really destroy their brain. It just kind of moved it around a little bit. And so the drawing that's in the book, and you can see it in there, is really based on a drawing from the journals. So the journals themselves were the basis for some of the illustration. And also, they sent back lots and lots of things from their journey. That was part of what they were tasked to do. So when everything got back, a lot of it's in museums and galleries, or there are photographs of it. So I used that as research. And then there were paintings that were made of Indians very close to that period. And so I used those paintings as the basis for what they wore. They were 10, 15 years of Lewis and Clark. So, and then in the other books, you can also, you get to sneak a peek at everybody's private letters, and their journals and diaries, and it really is like being a spy, except you're not truly intruding because they dropped dead a long time ago. So it's kind of okay to see their love letters and things that they did that were good or bad or indifferent, and put them into your books. And Witches was one of those that had pretty hairy stuff in it. So all the source material from Witches, which is this little guy. This is a Cybert Honor book, and it won Best Illustrated Book of the Year for the year it came out, 2011. And from the Society of Illustrators, it won Gold Medal, Best Illustrated Book of the Year. And it's opposite, totally opposite from How We Crossed the West in every way. Instead of being literal with the artwork, I tried to show what people were thinking inside their heads, because the things that were going on in the Salem witch trial, horrible, just things that maybe you didn't want to draw, but you wanted to show what was inside people's heads. So you saw the video, so I did things like this to show what the people were thinking. It's a different way of illustrating a book. And I strongly urge you to have kids, like I've been saying with the journal, to have them illustrate what they do, illustrate their maps, illustrate their stories, illustrate everything. Because when you look on your cell phone, you can even take pictures with your cell phone, and that works. If you look on your cell phone, our kids do that. There's a lot of visuals involved, and it's a good way of explaining things, and it's a good way of making things fun to see. So George versus George, which is this one right here, is my really popular book about the American Revolution. So I don't know if you got a chance to look at them yet. This is George Washington versus King George III. I've done talks about this book like 5 gazillion times. It's memorized, basically. And by the way, that's King George's real crown. And I have true or false tests that I give students when I do this that are funny, and I can tell you some of that too. But it's a good way of teaching things because the pictures are all accurate, and you'll see what the people really did look like at all their different ages. So I had to find what they look like at all the different ages. And it tells very surprising and personal things that make the people in history come to life. Because you don't want dead statues. You want people to come alive in history. They were like the rock stars of their day. And so why should they just be a statistic or a stone statue? You want them to come to life. And if kids realize that, not only are they learning things by reading nonfiction literature, as Common Core makes you do, but they also learn to write themselves and learn what to look for, and they don't drop dead asleep and fall dead on their desk. Then you can do, besides the big fancy pictures, you can teach things very easily with pictures. So this one, I don't know if you can see it, but you can probably find it. That teaches about how the governments in the country of England before we became a state and in the 13 colonies were alike. And so that's on page 26 and 27 maybe. I can't see without my glasses. And it says how government worked in England and how government worked in America. So pictures can make understandable certain things that are difficult to figure out just by reading. And so when you see cool little pictures of the real people, it's more fun to look at. And
we were talking about that a little bit this morning, Roz, about being able to read pictures and how important that is as part of the process of understanding.
That is great. I'm so glad you were talking about it. I didn't know you were talking about it.
Yeah, so it was a nice little tie-in.
I should mention to you that on my website, there are a whole lot of Common Core things that you can do. And somebody who's from New York, who's a PhD and writes Common Core material, wrote for me lesson plans that are truly detailed for George versus George and Witches and some of my other books that you don't happen to have. But like, here's one that's really popular one, How Ben Franklin Stole Me. And on my website you can find all of those. So I'm going to tell you what my website is. There are pages that are whole complete pages for each book, so you can kind of navigate the website. It's www.Rosalind Schanzer, and I'm going to spell it for you, ROSALYNSCHANZER.com. So www.rosalindschanzer.com. And I think you can even put in RozSchanzer.com, and it'll still come up.
Okay.
Okay, so on pages where there are those activities, you can click on the pages and open those up. Like it tells you how to have your class write a play based on the book Witches and perform it in class. And it actually ties it in specifically to all the Common Core whatever you call them, the list of things on Common Core that you have to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
And it has 7 activities like that. And the other thing is, I love the idea of comparing books. So I'm going to put on my glasses again and tell you my little list that I put for these books. So that what's the nice thing about doing nonfiction literature that's not textbooks is that you can do books on the really good books on the same topics with different books. So for George versus George, which tells about the American Revolution from both sides, it might be fun to compare it with The Crossing, How George Washington Saved the American Revolution by Jim Murphy. And Jim Murphy's a really famous guy, and you probably know who he is, although he writes for a little bit older group than elementary. And his focus was on the crossing of the Delaware on Christmas. And so it's a whole book about that. And that one's illustrated with famous paintings from the period, which we have a whole discussion about. And then another one by Marfé Ferguson Delano. Her book is called Master George's People. And the interesting thing in the focus of that book is that George Washington had slaves. And so it talks about George Washington's slaves, and that's a whole other view. And so all 3 of the books are sort of related because they're about George Washington and the crossing of the Delaware. My book, if you want to go in depth, you can read Jim Murphy's book. And I do say that George Washington had slaves, but there's a whole book about, his slaves that you can see. So it's fun to compare those. So that's a great way to do it. And I want to tell you about witches if I can ever find it. Some of the things that are, by the way, on the step-by-step directions for the activities for witches, where not only to perform a play, there's one about creating a great dictionary of the weird words that are in there and that are related to the witch trials, and then the kids define them, and they can also illustrate them. And then there's another cool game with which of the witch perspectives ring true. In other words, who is telling the truth, who's not telling the truth, and why, things like that. And so there's several. And then there's another activity that's an alphabet book project where the students work in small teams and they are assigned letters of the alphabet that they have to design. Like, I have a Darwin, I don't think it's sitting here, but Bonham Richard is the ship that Charles Darwin sailed around the world. Really good book. So they can find that. So before I go further, I'd just like to ask for questions so we can be a little bit interactive because I don't want to keep talking all the time. So do you guys have any questions or any comments or things that you wonder about Common Core? And I'm also interested if you like Common Core, if you are confused about it, or if you hate it, because everybody seems to have a controversy about it or not quite sure what to do with it. So does anybody have anything you want to ask? Oh, please ask.
Anybody? Christine? Okay. This is Christine.
Okay.
When you talk about Common Core, I will say that I do like it. And the reason that I like it is I feel that it allows us to go in depth a little bit more with the concepts and with their writing and with their reading. So I enjoyed, and I like the fact that you gave us some books that we can connect to, because that's a big thing in Common Core is text-to-text connecting and looking at. So that will be a really good resource for me this year.
Right. Yeah, if you go to, I was going to suggest another one, but I think it's too old for kids. But the Witches book is nonfiction. And it's a good one. It's a little old for your kids, but it's a good one to compare with Crucible, which is that fictional play And so when kids get a little bit older, The Crucible by Arthur Miller changes the facts to make it more dramatic. But I think it's really dramatic on its own. And so you can see how people who write fiction using a really good and famous author with a classic book, and how I write it as a nonfiction book for, it's more of a 5th grade and up through adult maybe book. And I think that the real story is just as dramatic as what he wrote. Put in a little sex and drugs and rock and roll. But they're good to compare with. And so comparing books is a great thing to do. And I'm really glad you like the writing aspect of doing Common Core. The good news is that besides just the writing, it also is an interesting way of teaching kids because you're reading literature instead of textbooks. And there's such good literature out there that if you know how to find it and where it is, you're golden. So, and by the way, I have a little bit of trouble hearing, I had a little trouble hearing you when we were talking. It was kind of breaking up a little. But anyway, I don't know where the mic is.
Okay, it's just part of the computer, so that might have been part of the problem.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Jody? Okay, Jody's going to come on over so she's closer to the machine. I can't really move because of the way that I'm plugged into the projector.
Hi.
This is Jody.
Hi. Hi, Jody.
I was just wondering how long it takes you to do research when you're researching all your facts to write your books.
Okay, it depends on the book. George versus George took me 2 years. And that book got real popular, and so right now I'm doing Abe versus Jeff. The Civil War is from both sides. That's going to take me even longer than 2 years because the Civil War is so complicated. Oh my gosh, so to condense the Civil War into 64 pages, it's like the hardest thing in the whole planet. And I think I'm getting it. I just finished the manuscript part. It's being vetted, and then I have to do the art. But so it doesn't come out till beginning of 2016, I think. So it's going to be a minute. But those took a couple years. Witches took about a year and a half. Some of the books, How Ben Franklin Stole the Lightning. I was doing another book at the same time, but it took maybe 7 months. It's a really good book about the science aspects of Ben Franklin, and that one's available. And Lewis and Clark, I was doing other books at the same time, but that one probably took me close to a year as well. I can't really quite remember. It's a 1997 book, still in print, which knocks me over because books go out of print in 2 seconds. I do have the Darwin book. I don't know if your schools do Darwin, but it's appropriate. So it's a really big, beautiful thing, and they take a long time because the research is intense. And so the research takes about a third of the time, a third to write it and a third generally, to illustrate it. And if I had more time to illustrate it, that would make me very happy.
I know sometimes when students are doing research projects, they think after 2 days of doing research, they should be ready to do their work. So I just wanted to be able to kind of share how long it would take an author who's researching for a book. I wanted to know how long it takes them.
All right. I'll give you a hint. On my desk over here to the left are 37 books. I'm just going to pick up top one. I don't know what it is. It's open. The books I use as research. This is Jefferson Davis American. So, I'm doing Abe versus Jeff, which is Abraham Lincoln versus Jefferson Davis. This is how thick all the books are. So that is why you can imagine that it takes me so long to do these books. They really are all thick, and I have to put them 64 pages. So making them come alive as human beings, tell funny stories about them, tell serious stories about them, use a lot of quotes they really say. I have, right now I'm doing a war between Abe and Jeff before they've even met each other, using their quotes about what they felt about slavery, because slavery's, central to the book. And so they have a debate with each other. And I use real quotes from before the Civil War that they really did say about the exact same subjects having to do with slavery. So there will be one from Abraham Lincoln here, and then one from Jefferson Davis here, and so forth and so forth. That was an interesting thing to look at because their views are so opposite.
Okay.
And I found out very surprising things about both of them. So I use a lot of, in other words, I use a lot of adult books by the best experts, and I don't use the ones that are bad. And the only time I use children's books is to make sure mine's not like anybody else's.
Okay.
Okay.
She said thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome very much.
Do you have a question, Sue?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask you, it's obvious that history is your passion. Most of your books, it looks like most of your books are about history. Do you have any books that are on totally different topics, and do you have any plans for books that are on completely different topics other than history?
I do. Well, I've written fiction before and sort of gotten pigeonholed as doing a lot of books about history and especially American history. And this is another one. This one just went out of print, unfortunately. John Smith escapes again. My favorite nonfiction one, it's included in certain textbooks where they take authors' books and put them into a textbook, like for English. And one of them is Davy Crockett Saves the World. And so it's not really a history book, it's a tall tale. And I love doing that. And before I started doing serious history, like these are semi-serious history, I did, two of my very favorite books were from the early 90s. One was Ezra in Pursuit, and the other was Ezra's Quest. And they're out of print, but they one of them won the Children's Choice Award. What it is Ezra is this little kid who goes back and forth in history, but it's based on real history, but it's not nonfiction.
Okay.
And this little boy wakes up in the middle of the night, and through a series of mazes, he chases some crooks through the whole entire West and down into Mexico and captures them and puts them in jail because so I'm rob a bank. And it's hilarious, and it's a whole lot of pictures. And to read the book, you have to be able to do this very complex maze through the scenery, and before you can turn the next page to see where he went next.
Okay.
So I do I've done over 300. I've illustrated over 300 books for kids.
Oh my golly. That's a lot.
Yeah.
We're like, oh boy. Does anybody else have a question? Okay. Annie has a question.
Yes. Hi, Roz. My
Hi.
name is Annie. You mentioned that you do a lot of your research through adult books. And
Yes.
I'm thinking about my students. I have 6th graders, and I want them to mimic what you did with Lewis and Clark and create a diary of sorts using historical information. So we are going to use that. So I'm so grateful that you're here. However, my students don't read, adult books. Do you have any recommendations for other resources, maybe online, where they can find primary sources? Because I know that's big in Common Core, using primary, more authentic sources. Do you use those?
All right. First place, I'm using adult books so that I can write a book for kids. So one good thing for them to do is look at the very best kids' books. And they can use those for research. That's perfectly legitimate because there are so many good people that are doing these books. And you just have to know where to find them. And we just closed our website for that. I'll give you a website where you can tie books to Common Core and everything else. So I'm gonna bring that up in a minute. I'll give that to you at the end, where you can find lists of really good books by really good authors. And I just have to make sure the website is up. Can you understand me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. And I can use your books.
Original source material. Okay, right. Okay. For example, you can find it in a lot of places. For example, the journals of Lewis and Clark are in the library. You could go there and see the actual journals. And it's all quotes. The whole thing is quotes. And so I just picked out the cool ones. Be surprised what's really there. And the whole thing is cool. And for the Darwin book, I went online, and there's a Darwin site out of England that has every single thing he ever wrote. And so you're not having to go through the big book. You can actually find every single thing that Darwin ever wrote. Sometimes I can send you that information. It's in the back of the Darwin book, too. It's, put on my glasses, I won't tell you. Original source material you can use is like the journals and the interviewing of real people. And that definitely counts. If you interview real people, you can get kids so excited about doing it. I did a school in Pennsylvania where they were writing about the most boring thing in the world. They were writing about government. And they were falling asleep, and they hated it. So what we did was they wanted to write a whole book about government. So we split the class up into groups, and they covered national government, local government, et cetera, et cetera. And what the people did for the local government was they went and interviewed the mayor and all these people that were involved with government. And elementary school kids can get in to see these people because, you know, they're kind of politicians, and they love to have kids. And they gave them great interviews, and the kids took notes, wrote it down, took photographs, and put what they said their job was in their own words. Because I made, except for the quotes, I want the kids to write in their own words and have fun with the writing so that it's not real formal. And so they did that. And they illustrated everything, and they took pictures of, like, the courthouse themselves, and they made collages and put their pages together. So each group did a double-page spread, and it was full of pictures that they took and quotes, cut them out and put them on like a collage. And they drew little cartoon characters, and one of them did how a law is made, because that was part of government too. And so they had a little character that was a cartoon, and he was shaped like a piece of paper that was a law, and he had little arms and legs, and he was hilarious. It was like really funny. He said, "I am going to make a law against bullying," and that was his law that he was going to make. And then he told all the real procedures that he had to go through. So to find that out, they had to do research to see how you made a law, and then they made it fun by putting, by animating the characters. It's a wonderful book. It's somewhere I have it digitally, the whole book. And there are comments down at the bottom explaining what's happening. But you can take the most dull thing, and the kids can do something fantastic with it that they'll really want to keep for their whole life. So somebody put that together as a book, and they bound it. It was a big book like this, and the students all, showed it to the other students, so they were interacting with the other grades. And then somebody made a copy, some nice person paid to have a copy of the books for each student so that they could keep a copy of the whole book. So they wrote a book in class, and they could write a big fat book with only doing 2 pages per group, and the groups were like 3 or 4 kids per group. So that worked. I mean, it worked in spades. It was really, that's another thing you can do. What did I leave out?
Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to say? Any questions that they had? One of the things that you have really made me think a little bit more about is, again, coming back to the illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
And really making sure that those are understood and comprehended and made with validity when kids are illustrating or when they're looking at an illustration. I guess I always just take that as part of the story, but not really intentionally look at it maybe the way that we should. I don't know if anyone else feels that way.
Okay, I'll give you some tips on the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Say you go on a field trip. It is very portable to take a couple of markers or colored pencils or something like that. It's very portable.
Mm-hmm.
So you can easily take that with you along with a little notebook journal. Mm-hmm. And if you go to the zoo or something, they can actually draw the animal they see, or they can put leaves in the book because that counts as a collage, or anything that they hear, they can draw those pictures from real life. If you go to a museum, you can do that too, and you just have to realize it might take a little bit longer, but that's okay because you can narrow your focus. So you're going to the zoo to study giraffes today, not just the whole zoo where you're wandering around, or you're going to the museum to see what people in the Stone Age looked like, or did, or what a dinosaur bones look like, and so you could just focus on the one thing, and then if kids wanted to draw what they really saw, they could do it. If they want to take their cell phone and take a picture of it, that's totally legitimate because they can use those pictures too. And if they just want to collect things they've seen or just write about it, they can do that too. And I also like the idea of being creative with the artwork, like the little kid who made the law with using a cartoon. Kids like that. It doesn't have to be all serious. So if you add humor to the artwork, it's good. And they can make their artwork on anything. If they want to draw on wood, they can draw on a piece of wood. If they want to cut up pieces of cloth or colored paper and paste them down, they can do that. They're not limited to perfect, exact, ideal everything. And so that's why Witches was fun for me, because I used my imagination to do a nonfiction story about something very scary that was in people's heads. And that's okay. It's all okay. So, and you can use your imagination about what to draw. Like, if a kid is standing next to the dinosaur, they might want to show how big the kid was compared to the dinosaur. And that is science, so that you can relate size. There are 10 million ways to skin a cat, and so what you tell them is have fun with it, use your imagination. If you can't draw, that's cool, because there are lots of ways you can do it. Such and so, you can take pictures. If you can draw, that's your chance to show off. And if you like color, this is your chance to get colorful. And if you like a pencil, you can use a pencil. Anything goes. But the idea is to be creative and actually show a nonfiction kind of subject matter in some way, using their imagination again, having fun, and they're golden. The maps, you might want to, maps are kind of hard to do the original shape. So say you're doing the whole United States. They may want to have an outline of the United States that's handed out. And then they can color it in and add the people and the animals and the fancy stuff and the color and fish in the ocean and all the sea monsters and anything that they can think of. And some of my other books, a lot of my other books have maps in them too. I really like maps. Had real good success with that. That's a good thing to draw and color in and play around with. And a big map mural is also fun. One of the schools I talked to did Lewis and Clark. They did this map. And basically, they did it so that it was huge. It covered a whole huge wall. I don't even know. They must have put pieces of paper together. And everybody worked on a part of the map in full color. And it was on the stage behind where I was giving the talk. And it took up how they have those auditoriums with a big wall. And they put like a mural that was the map. And they were so excited about it because they all remembered all the states. They remembered the Indians. They remembered everything. And some of them had memorized the book. Go figure that out. They did.
That makes you feel good.
It did. I'll never forget that. That's been a little bit ago, but they memorized the book. And they've done plays based on this book. whole place, and they made the scenery. So when Lewis and Clark were in the boat, they made a big cutout boat, like some of the boats, all the boats in the book are accurate. So they made a big cutout boat, and the kids held off to the boat. They had rotating scenery behind them. I mean, it was a whole deal. It must have taken them forever. So the people in the boat were holding on to the boat, and they would go across the stage. It was fantastic, and they wore costumes, and there was a girl who played Meriwether Lewis. I mean, anything did go. And they brought in the dog, his name Seaman. They brought in a dog. It was the same breed of dog that's in this book, and showed everybody what the dog really looked like. That was wonderful. And we waited to bring in the dog till the end of the talk because nobody ever looks at anything but the dog or a baby.
It's kind of like a baby, right?
Right. That's a big deal. So basically, that's it. Okay, and any questions or?
Any other questions? You've been absolutely a wealth of information, Roz.
Oh, good.
And
I hope so.
I hope
So
that-
look on the website, and you'll see the books, and maybe you can find some of those activities on there and how they're tied in, and that'll also jumpstart you to some other things.
Yes.
And I'm going to do one thing really fast if I can see well enough to do this, and I hope it doesn't cut you off if it does. I apologize.
Okay.
I just want to tell you the exact address of the website that is going to tell you names of books and authors that write really good books. So give me 2 seconds here.
Okay.
Okay, it is inkthinktank.com.
Okay.
Inkthinktank is all one word, .com. And there's a link in there where you can find all these excellent, first-rate, outstanding authors. And you can, any book that you pick of theirs, you're going to love their books because they're fantastic. And you can relate the books to their age level, to the subject that you're teaching, to anything from math to history to geography, any of that stuff. And then you can plug in whatever you want to know or whatever you're teaching, like you can put in George Washington or name of a person, and you can find a list of first-rate books that you can use in your school. They're the good books, the really good ones, not the junk ones. There's junk out there for sure, but there are also, we're like in the gold age of nonfiction.
And we really look at tying in different parts of the curriculum because, as you know, time is of the essence. And so some of us are teaching just ELA, reading and writing, but they're looking to find ways to incorporate the social studies and science into that. And
Yes, and I do think that as they're joined at the hip.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you have been absolutely amazing. We are going to get on your website, and then we're going to do an activity with your books, which we will share with you.
Oh, good. Okay, I want to know.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great
Bye,
day.
everybody. Good luck.
Bye.